Hi. So at this moment at 1:24 p.m. Eastern Time, Donald J. Trump is under arrest.
Yes, he is.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading another episode of Wigs for Wigs. I'm Joe Cook, joined once again by Bill Venezia, and we left off last episode, if you're listening sequentially here, saying how we didn't think anything was really directly on the horizon in terms of Donald Trump and his legal woes with the district attorney in New York. Little did we know, thinking that the grand jury was scheduled to go away for several weeks, that a couple hours after we recorded that, the grand jury would be coming back together to vote to indict Donald Trump. And so today, we're gathered here on whatever the date is today, April 4th.
April 4th.
2023, just if you're listening to this later on, this is when we're recording this. And Donald Trump has literally just turned himself in to the district attorney's office in New York City to face whatever the indictment is that was handed down by the grand jury this past week. So I'm joined here by Bill once again, and we're going to just kind of discuss what we think is coming with this trial of Donald Trump. So Bill, welcome back.
Joe, it's like 1:30 Eastern Standard Time in Jersey City, New Jersey, and currently the former president is under arrest. Being fingerprinted. Now, he's not being treated like Joe average citizen because he's not being handcuffed, nor will he be incarcerated.
Probably not going to get a mugshot taken either.
No, they've already said that. So I guess at 2:15 he's scheduled for arraignment, so we'll get to know what the 30 counts are. They are felonies, so it's going to be, no, they're not felonies. Maybe they're misdemeanors. I'm not sure.
There's got to be a felony in there.
Yeah.
You're not arresting him purely for misdemeanors.
Misdemeanors are crimes, but you're right. I would think that there are some felonies.
Well, first of all, in New York State, the dividing line between a misdemeanor and a felony is simply if it's a year or less of jail term maximum, it's a misdemeanor. If it's over a year, it's a felony. Now, the expectation is that this is related to his hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, possibly to Karen McDougal also, the Playboy playmate that he had an affair with, and the catch and kill agreement he had with the National Enquirer to kill any stories of problematic nature for Donald Trump during the campaign. But in New York State, if they charge him with falsifying business records, which is what it seems like a lot of these misdemeanors will probably be, that he claimed these payments to Stormy Daniels were legal fees, and that's obviously not true. It can be a felony if you could say he did that in the furtherance of another crime. So if it's connected to another crime, why he was falsifying business records, then it becomes a felony. And the expectation is it's probably a campaign finance violation that they're going to identify as that other crime.
Right. We won't know that till they basically read the charges. And from what I'm told,
which will happen soon, sometime in the next hour probably.
Yeah, at 2:15, and it should go off on time. But what I'm told is they won't read each individual charge.
Well, he'll be asked,
Yeah.
is my understanding.
Yes.
He and his lawyers, do you want to hear the entire indictment read? And odds are they'll say no, it's been shown to us. And therefore, we don't have to hear it all.
You can't capitalize on with no camera, with no video.
Yeah, there's
in
no
the
video
courtroom.
in the room.
You can't make it a campaign.
Let me ask you about that, because the prosecutors, well, I'm not sure about the prosecutors actually, but several news outlets have filed a motion to the judge asking for permission to have cameras, not just for today, but for the trial that's going to eventually follow. The judge denied their request to have cameras today for the arraignment.
Except for still photographs.
There can be still photos before the proceedings begin.
Yes, yeah.
So you won't actually even have one of Donald Trump standing behind the defense table or anything. But for the trial, when the trial inevitably comes, whenever that will be, I assume the judge will set a preliminary schedule for a trial today. because Trump's going to plead not guilty. That would be a real twist, wouldn't it? If he just pled guilty. But what do you think about cameras covering the actual trial?
Well, it's interesting that the judge and the defense attorneys are basically, 2/3 of this triangle here, and they both are on the same side of not having cameras in the courtroom. And if it's past practice by this judge, Judge Marchand, that he has not allowed video in his courtroom prior, and that goes to the case that he heard with regard to the former CFO of the Trump organization.
Yeah, Alan Weisselberg.
Alan Weisselberg.
Same judge who presided over that trial.
So I personally, being a political junkie, I would be interested in it and watching it for myself. But I don't think there's any chance that this judge will reverse himself. I don't think there will be cameras in the courtroom.
Yeah,
I find it interesting.
New York in general is very hesitant having cameras inside a courtroom for a trial. We have, of course, seen in other states high-profile trials have video in them. I mean, I'm thinking, of course, the biggest of all would be OJ. I mean, I can remember even as a kid the OJ trial. That was everywhere. I was only 7 or 8 when OJ was on trial, and yet I remember seeing it on TV. But there is a public interest in this trial. That's the case that the news outlets are making, that this is beyond just somebody being charged with financial crimes.
Sure.
There is
it's historic.
a clear public reason to be engaged in this trial. But you're right, this judge has a reputation for being very straightforward and very fair. I guess there's a case to be made that to see Donald Trump on video in the trial, on the defense table, would somehow create a prejudicial view against him. Although you are supposed to be presumed innocent, but we all know that you see somebody on trial, you can't assume that they're that's a criminal. But I don't know. I really wish it was going to be televised because I would like to watch it.
I would like to watch it, but I think there's not a snowball's chance in hell that it will be televised. I am surprised at the Trump Legal Brain Trust not wanting it televised, and for anything but political reasons, where they could basically grift more money out of it.
That surprises me a little bit too. I can't believe Trump wouldn't want this to be on TV.
Pardon the interruption.
I imagine this is more his legal team than him.
Yeah, and it's
The idea of him ever turning down a chance to be on television.
Well, look what he's done for the last 2 weeks. He's controlled the narrative. Yesterday, when the news outlets picked up his motor caravan from Mar-a-Lago to the airport, it was like watching OJ in the Bronco.
The white Bronco?
Yeah, I mean, it was like...
His buddy Al Cowlins is driving.
Ridiculous. What I did find noteworthy, the little bit of what I watched, there weren't that many people on the side of the road, yelling and cheering for him.
No, not really.
No, and actually from
today there didn't seem to be either in New York City.
New York basically made sure that the near the courthouse was clear. They did a good job of
let's give the
that.
New York Police Department credit. I mean, they deal with this kind of thing.
Yes.
Not a president being indicted, but high-profile indictments, having to move high-profile people around the city for various reasons. And they really were ahead of the game, getting all the preparations in place to not have some kind of spectacle, one way or the other. Either pro-Trump or anti-Trump people. There didn't seem to be much of any of that.
I really think this judge is between a rock and a hard place with regard to conduct by Trump outside of the courtroom. If he basically increases the rhetoric and tests him like Roger Stone did at his trial, first of all, is he going to put the former president in jail? I doubt it.
No.
Can he find him?
I don't see any circumstance where he winds up in jail.
Could he find
even if
him?
he's found guilty of felonies.
Now, if he
He's
makes
77 years old, whatever he is. It's white collar crime. I don't see any.
But if he increases the rhetoric of threatening people, like the prosecutor, like the judge, the prosecutor can bring charges against them for that.
I'm actually curious to see if that's included in the indictment today.
Well, could be.
Because
Could be.
he had
I mean, he
some
was extremely
pretty
inflammatory.
clear threats against
Yeah.
the prosecutor this past week.
Yes.
On his social media.
And if you noticed, his attorneys,
And his legal team made him take it all down.
not only did they make him take it down, they went out of their way to throw, like rose petals at the judge.
Yeah.
Which
And to say in interviews on all sorts of media outlets that, that rhetoric is not acceptable.
no,
So,
that's why you'll never see Trump on the stand. And
God would I give to see that.
no, he would never testify. They would never let him
His
testify.
lawyers would never
He's
allow him
already
to do that.
he's already
We heard that
testified
in the
against-
impeachment
Yeah.
and in the Mueller investigation, that his lawyers, the last thing they would ever allow was for him to face actual questions from Bob Mueller because he can't help himself but lie.
No, and not only that, he's his own worst attorney. He went on Hannity's show to basically rant and rave when Hannity was throwing him softball questions about the documents in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
He incriminated himself. And Hannity was saying, well, we'll move on to the next question.
Let's move on.
And Trump wouldn't go, let it go. He basically, I mean, if you don't think Jack Smith's got all these recordings, I mean, they're worth more than anybody's testimony. The guy's testifying against himself.
Did you happen to see Fox News' legal analyst, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, yesterday? They were previewing this whole thing today, and he accidentally called him President Fraud instead of President Trump.
No, I didn't.
That's quite a Freudian slip.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I think the discussion needs to move on. What impact does this have on him? Number one, with the Republican primary and his potential challengers and his ability to raise money now in the short term. And then if we
Well,
can
he's
move
raising
on,
a lot of money off of this.
he certainly is. I mean, they say, and it's tough to basically, unless you look at his ledger sheets, that they've raised $7 million during the past 2 weeks, which is a decent sum, but it's not a awe-inspiring sum.
For this time in the
Yeah.
primary cycle, that's a large sum of money.
If you look at some of the other people, and well, for all practical purposes, we'll consider DeSantis as a candidate, regardless of the fact that
He's
he's
just
not
waiting for
officially
the end of the
in.
legislative session.
Or to see.
Although I think he's killed his own momentum by waiting.
I think you're right, but he came out to basically defend him, as well as McCarthy and the other Republicans.
Yeah.
To take his case.
How about DeSantis?
How about Pence though? Pence basically said that he should be held accountable, but not by New York.
Yeah.
Who's going to hold him accountable? God?
What does that mean? But how about DeSantis coming out and saying, I will not aid in the arrest of Donald Trump. I will resist federal authorities who come to take him away.
He must think that Florida is a republic unto itself. Like it's the Republic of Florida.
First of all, there was no way this was going to come to federal agents going to drag Donald Trump out of Mar-a-Lago.
DeSantis should change the
name. It was going to
name.
be a self-surrender all along.
He's not the governor of Florida. He's the emperor of Florida.
Way to talk tough in absolutely meaningless ways.
Yeah.
DeSantis.
Speaking of talking tough, Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos were at a park around the corner.
Tweedledum.
Can you imagine this is what you have representing Donald Trump's defense team? At this park where the police allowed them to protest, there were Trump supporters and anti-Trump people.
I think they were the only two members of Congress who showed up.
Supposedly there were others, but they made themselves scarce. And actually Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene hightailed it out of there when the numbers and when it got loud, lock him up, which was the refrain, which isn't payback.
When the only people in your corner are Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos.
Who really distinguished herself with Leslie Stahl the other night. I totally understand why 60 Minutes had her on. In fairness, that's fine, but Leslie Stahl's off her game. And, she didn't do a good job of basically highlighting some of the crazy things this woman said or held her accountable for it.
You think it makes sense for 60 Minutes to have had Marjorie Taylor Greene on?
I think with the
A second-term congressman from a nothing district in Georgia just because she's a troll?
she's got a lot of bona fides and a lot of gravitas with the current Republican Party. And Kevin McCarthy is the one who's in power.
Well, yeah, McCarthy surrendered so much
I
power to her.
pray to God that Donald Trump picks her as his vice president. To run with him. That will be an utter circus. The people who are going to reap the benefits of that is John Heilman and the circus on Showtime.
Yeah.
And the Lincoln Project.
Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene, my God.
I think long term, first of all, Trump's got a busy month of April. He's got the fraudulent case that's being brought upon him by the Attorney General of the state of New York, so he'll be back in court, whether it's New York or Albany. He's got the civil case regarding the alleged rape,
He's
and that's
essentially
being held
going on
in
trial
April.
for rape. It's a civil
Yes.
case, but it's
Which-
essentially a trial for rape in a few weeks.
Absolutely, and then if you're
There's a good chance he's going to be indicted in Georgia.
in Georgia and Mar-a-Lago for the
I'm not sure when I think indictments are more likely to come sooner from Georgia than because that grand jury wrapped up already.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Fannie
true.
Willis is reviewing everything. She herself said that indictments are coming soon in that case. She didn't, specify when, but it seems like the special prosecutor still has a little bit further to go. But he just won that big court case to get all those Trump aides to be forced to testify.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to require some time to bring that logistically
You're
together,
probably right, but think of like this domino effect. Maybe DeSantis is smart to wait till June before he announces, because by that time, maybe the Republican Party comes to its senses and says, okay, we have to basically
That's something
give
we've
up
been saying for 7 years.
give up our blind, following of Donald Trump, because honestly, he's not doing himself any good with independent voters.
No.
I think this is all based. He's a day
Well,
trader.
there have been polls showing that independents, by a large margin, approve of the indictment of Donald Trump.
60% of all Americans approve of it.
Meaning, overwhelmingly Democrats do.
Yeah.
About 20% of Republicans in the poll I saw
Yeah.
are, I guess, Republicans like me who want to see Donald Trump go away and approved of it. And then a majority of independents, a significant majority of independents, to get you to 60% of all Americans. So, people, at least independents, seem to have an open mind about what these charges are and where exactly this is headed for Donald Trump. Not just in New York, but in these other cases also. I mean, this one is the least serious, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of actual potential consequences.
I think it's caused his wife. I read in the week that his
boo-hoo for Melania.
Melania has moved out of her quarters because I guess the whole thing is embarrassing because she had, she was pregnant with Barron, and that.
Or they just had Barron.
Or they just had Barron. So she's probably mortified by this whole thing. I'm sure that. Ultimately, when his political career comes to an end, that marriage will come to an end.
Oh no, they're so in love.
Oh God, it's. But it's kind of interesting
It's
too.
been totally about true love ever since he saw her naked in a magazine and decided to marry her.
You don't see any.
And then cheated the immigration system to bring her
mom and
parents
dad
to America.
I guess Slovenia was okay in terms of immigrants coming to this country.
Yeah, what makes them different from some of these other countries?
Oh well, the answer is
Who wants
obvious.
to say it?
Yeah, the answer is obvious. It's interesting that only his son is basically around him with regard to this stuff.
I mean, have you seen Donald Trump Jr.'s defenses of him? These absolutely insane videos that he puts out.
Now, I've been told that he's taken up residency in Montana.
Or Eric. Eric's the other one.
Yeah, I don't see much of Eric.
Eric put out something, I think it was yesterday.
Did he?
Saying, basically, this is about, he's being put on trial for having an NDA. NDAs are something that all Americans have. What?
Yeah, you have one, Joe, right? I have one,
I
yeah.
don't think I've ever signed a non-disclosure agreement with anybody.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You know, it's kind of funny too that.
Or do I have one and I just can't talk about it because that would violate my NDA?
I got a kick out of Stormy Daniels. Her comment was that, this couldn't happen to a better tiny person.
Yeah.
But
notice who's been very silent from the Trump family. Is Ivanka.
Ivanka and Jared. They want nothing to do with this. They want to separate themselves completely from this.
Ivanka put out a statement the other
Jared's
day.
counting his Saudi money and his
I know.
Qatari money.
Ivanka put out a statement a couple days ago, though, that was about as bland a statement as you could possibly put out. Just saying, I appreciate all the support from my father. She didn't claim that he was innocent. She didn't say, I'm with him and I'll stand with him through this trial.
All
it said was, I appreciate all the support from my father.
I wish that I could have heard the grand jury testimony of Conway. Kellyanne Conway and Hope.
Well, they're divorced now.
And Hope Hicks.
Kellyanne and George.
But Hope Hicks too.
Yeah, Hope Hicks.
And you know what? I don't think. Well, I know that Hope Hicks. I don't believe that she would lie in front of a grand jury. Kellyanne, I have no idea about. Because basically she swallowed her pride and went hook, line, and sinker for this whole thing, including giving up a marriage. But anyway, so it's interesting, Joe, to see. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but this trial literally could go on for a year. With all the.
It could.
Actually,
and especially
it could.
because Trump's team is going to try all these motions to dismiss and all. That's going to gum up the works and slow it down.
Yeah, but that does not. I think that's deleterious to his candidacy. If he's got these things hanging over his head.
That's what they're planning to do.
Yeah, it's interesting too that he changed.
I will give Trump credit. He did hire a new lawyer yesterday.
Yes, he did.
A legitimate lawyer.
Not an ambulance chaser like Joe Tacopina.
Oh, God. Who might have to recuse himself from this case, by the way. Because
what's
he offered
issue?
legal advice to Stormy Daniels back in.
Oh, my God. That's the reason why.
So I think this new lawyer is probably going to have to take the lead because I think Joe Tacopina is going to have to recuse himself from the case for conflict of interest.
I did hear that.
But Trump is winding up with a net positive in that because this guy seems like a real lawyer from a big New York City law firm.
With prosecutorial experience. So being on that side of the
and
case,
actually used to work in the Southern District of New York Federal Prosecutor's Office with Alvin Bragg.
Oh boy.
The Attorney General. So, the District Attorney, I mean. So, the two of them know each other personally. They work together at the Southern District of New York.
I don't know if that's still going to lead to any cordial relations between
I don't
the two
either,
attorneys.
but compare that to the resumes of some of these other lawyers that Trump has hired.
Oh my goodness! You mean the ones that are potentially facing disbarment over the documents imbroglio that basically signed off that I found it interesting.
Well, they've been forced to testify too.
Yes, they have.
And how high a bar is that to negate attorney-client privilege?
Anything that the former president touches turns to what. I mean, it's like sad because potentially some of these attorneys are going to get disbarred over this, just like Rudy.
Yeah.
I'm
not surprised that the Mark Meadowses and the other White House advisors are being forced to testify now. That's well-established federal law that a criminal investigation overrides executive privilege. That was the whole essence of U.S. v. Nixon, which was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court. It's never really been disagreed with by the court since then.
Yeah.
So, that wasn't a surprise that they're being forced to testify now. Even Mike Pence being forced to testify about certain elements of what he's doing. But the shocking one is to have a lawyer forced to testify about their contacts with their client, because that's an incredibly high bar to get by if you're trying to compel that. And the special counsel met that bar, according to a federal judge, to force Donald Trump's lawyers to testify against him. in the documents case.
I think the attorneys representing the former president knew beforehand that this was just an effort to delay and to spin the wheels of the judicial system. It's interesting to note that the people who ruled on this ruled on it post haste. You know, it was like real quick turnarounds.
Yeah, it was something like they gave 6 hours for a initial statement by each side, and then 6 hours for a response.
And then they responded ASAP.
Yeah.
You know?
But that's a big one, to force a lawyer to testify. Not only that, that implies that the special counsel has evidence already of crimes being committed. Because to overcome attorney-client privilege, you have to show that the attorney was being used in the furtherance of a crime.
Right.
So that essentially means that he has shown beyond a reasonable doubt to a judge that a crime was committed that this attorney was being used for. So
Now, from 21 years of
that suggests he's ready for indictments, at least on something.
Absolutely. And for 21 years of watching Law and Order, I know that this is potentially the charge of suborning perjury can be levied against the attorneys.
Yeah.
You know, which that's a horrible way to end your career. You know, plain and simple. But
Well, I mean, these White House advisors who are being called in by the special counsel are probably going to try pleading the fifth. People like Mark Meadows and all. That's
so
what they did to the congressional investigation.
and that's what they're angling.
And they're
for.
certainly free to do that.
Yeah,
Fine.
they're angling for immunity.
Donald Trump, but remember, Donald Trump himself back in 2016 said, if you're not guilty of anything, why do you plead the fifth? Even though he himself pled the fifth over 200 times in his deposition recently.
You can't basically take them out of
But
you never could.
exactly what you said, immunity. I didn't realize this. This was just a legal analyst I was listening to the other day explaining this, who used to be a federal prosecutor. Once a prosecutor makes the offer of immunity, you can no longer invoke the Fifth Amendment.
Right.
You don't have to accept immunity. Just the offer conveys that to you, and you are then required to testify. So
You're required to testify, and you're still open to prosecution. Is that the case?
I don't think you're open to prosecution.
Well, if you don't accept the immunity,
I think the prosecutor giving it to you essentially gives it to you.
I see.
Whether you don't have to make a conscious decision to accept it.
better go back and check my Law and Order.
You are given immunity, and then you are required to testify.
Okay.
But you are then, that guarantees that you will not be prosecuted, which for a Mark Meadows might be a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Because I think he probably has a lot of legal exposure with some of this stuff.
I
So
don't-
to get the deal that if he gives his testimony, he won't have to face legal exposure himself, I think is a pretty good deal about Mark Meadows.
I'm going to have to run this by one of the people I know that will be listening to
Maybe
this.
somebody who listens is a lawyer or better
Yes.
legal expert
Well,
than us.
We have a former judge who listens to us.
Well, good. I mean,
Honorable Ed DeFazio.
I hope to hear.
Eddie,
If I'm completely wrong, I apologize.
Eddie,
I'm relaying what I heard on a.
if you're
from a legal
listening,
analyst.
we need
So
your
anybody
your
out there, I know I
expertise.
have former students who went on to law school, whatever it may be. Anybody out there listening, if what we're saying is completely incorrect about immunity, please do let us know.
I think-
we don't like saying things that are factually untrue.
I think the Honorable
We
Ed
offer a lot of
DeFazio
opinions here, but we don't like saying things that are factually untrue.
is potentially one of our guests in the future, just to set us straight on the legal path as we approach all these cases.
I am a casual legal observer. I mean, I read it in the extent of studying history and social sciences in that regard, but no, I do not claim to be an expert on legal minutia.
I took the LSATs
Oh, really?
and got me into New York Law School. Rejected from Seton Hall, rejected from Rutgers. And truthfully, hardest test I ever took. God
I
bless.
know a lot of people who took the LSATs and went to law school. It was a very common thing for history majors. I guess
Yep.
since history teaches you all about research methods and everything that will then be beneficial as a lawyer, it's a common career track for somebody who's a history major. Just wasn't my interest to go that way. But yeah, anybody out there listening, if we ever say something that is factually untrue, please do.
Please let us know and
Let us know.
Set us
We're-
straight.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll share that on a future episode. As always, we can be reached at Wigs for Wigs. Good time to point that out. WIGSFORWHIGS @gmail.com. Some of you might know one of us personally and you want to reach out to us individually. That's fine too. But anybody out there in listener land, we do have the podcast website where you can find us and reach us. So that's our challenge. You let us know if we're ever wrong. We don't want to put out fake information, incorrect information.
No, we're not purveyors of misinformation.
No. But let's get back to what's going on. With that all said, how do we see this playing out?
Well, I don't think we're going to be able to see how this plays out.
And we're going to hear the charges today, right? That's going to be unsealed.
Probably tonight.
So,
Probably tonight. I think they'll be released.
We'll
to
at
the
least have an
media.
idea of what it is.
So it'll be interesting to see the different legal talking heads on
the various
cable,
networks, yeah.
cable stations kind of sort through this. And honestly, the best way to get the information is a reputable print media.
Yeah.
Tomorrow the Times.
I'll
still
read the
think-
Washington Post as I usually do.
I still believe that the Wall Street Journal, although somewhat tainted because of Rupert, their editorial board is a little fairer than the New York Post. So
Yeah,
I
they
do
are.
read it too, Joe, because I always want to know what the enemy is up to.
So, the thing I'm curious to see when this indictment is made public, sometime in the next few hours, presumably, there's going to be a felony charge. There's no way Alvin Bragg brings this case if it's just a bunch of misdemeanors. Nobody would allow him to do that in the prosecutor's office. So, what is that felony? What is the other crime that they connect these falsification of business records to in order to make it a felony? It's probably going to be a campaign finance violation.
Yeah, but that in itself is a reach. If it is that, campaign finance
Well,
is
that's what-
more a federal offense.
Right, and that's a legal defense I think the Trump team can make. That
Yeah.
this is a presidential election, therefore it's federal election law.
Right.
So why is this being prosecuted by a state attorney? But I mean,
If
that is what
it's-
Michael Cohen pled guilty to and was found
Yes,
guilty of. Was
but in the federal court.
right. That was in the federal court. So I'm curious to see that. What is the felony here? I'm curious to see whether it's today or in the future if Alvin Bragg adds charges related to the threatening language that Donald Trump put up on his social media and in other outlets. If that gets a charge attached to it, because it certainly can. I think that's a pretty straightforward case, actually, in terms of limits on free speech, of language that can incite violence, which is one of the legal limits on free speech. And number 3 is, do other crimes get included in this indictment? Other financial crimes even, because we did have the Trump Organization found guilty of numerous financial crimes, including the falsification of business records.
Yep.
Do they try to charge Donald Trump personally with some of those things that have already gone through and found the organization?
I think
found
that's
guilty?
more likely, and one of the things that if you want to read the tea leaves a little bit,
Because that brings Alan Weisselberg in as a potential witness
yes,
also.
and Alan Weisselberg just recently fired his former attorney, who was Trump's attorney at one time, and hired new independent counsel.
Again, you already
Is
have a
that
conviction of
telling
the
you-
organization.
Is that telling you something?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You already have a conviction of the organization. Do you try to charge Donald Trump personally with those things?
Right.
Because those were New York State crimes. So you can extend that, I assume, to Donald Trump individually as a person involved in that conspiracy to defraud, or whatever exactly the crime was, falsification of business records, whatever it was. So I'm curious to see if that gets pulled into this indictment also, any of that. If it's not just the Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, David Pecker, hush money stuff, but if they also try to bring in some of those other things.
Well, it's if it was a federal case, it's the people versus Donald Trump, because he was defrauding.
Well, it is the people of the state of
Yeah,
New York
yeah,
versus
he's
Donald Trump.
defrauded the people of a fair and free election. I don't think that's a stretch for a.
That's what the federal prosecutor said in Michael Cohen's case.
That's a federal prosecution, justification. I'm not so sure that the Manhattan District Attorney can basically do that. I don't know. To me, that's a stretch. And I would expect that.
But the thing is, it has to be a felony to make this worthwhile, I would think.
Yeah, I agree with you. But
that's the most logical felony. So I don't know what else. I don't know what kind of maybe tax fraud or anything could be a felony. I mean, that's not, again, something I really know. But I can't imagine this indictment is being brought without felonies as part of it. So if it's not campaign finance, which is what that would be, then it has to be something else.
Well, consider the length of time that Alvin Bragg took to bring this case. My opinion is that he's basically dotted his I's and crossed his T's. I doubt that he would risk his reputation with something that gets thrown out.
Right. I don't think it should be thrown out, but
I think potentially some of the charges could get thrown out. That's going to be interesting.
Again, I mean, this is just secondhand, having listened to a lot of legal analysts talking about this on various TV channels and editorial boards and all. It seems like the misdemeanor cases, most people acknowledge, are pretty straightforward cases. That he did claim these payments to Stormy Daniels and Carrie McDougal as legal fees, which they were not, and therefore that's falsification of business records. It seems like most people acknowledge that that's a pretty straightforward case. But again, I don't think you're bringing this case against a former president for a bunch of misdemeanors.
No.
So what is the felony? I think it's probably the campaign financing, but are there other felonies that they're bringing into this also? And that's why I'm curious about anything regarding maybe tax fraud, bank fraud, the things that the Trump organization was found guilty of, which, by the way, was also in this judge's courtroom. The same judge oversaw the trial of the Trump organization.
Yes, he did. Yep. And a really good background to the judge. Came from Columbia to the United States at 6. Mm-hmm. Worked hard, working class parents in Queens. Put himself through college.
The only thing I'm amazed about is that there haven't been racist attacks against him yet by Donald Trump.
Oh, I'm sure there have been.
Because do you remember?
He's got death
remember
threats
the one
too.
federal judge when Trump was president, who was his family, I believe, had immigrated from Mexico.
Yes.
And Trump really launched into racist attacks against him. I don't really remember what case that was even.
Me neither. There were so
many. It's hard to keep
like
track.
But yeah.
We have seen a lot of anti-Semitic things Trump has put out there.
Well,
and his supporters.
And
this whole idea that George Soros is behind this whole thing is just an anti-Semitic trope.
I was watching yesterday afternoon.
Donald Trump influenced politics for years the same way George Soros influences politics. But it's a reason they all identify George Soros that makes him different, which is that he's Jewish. I mean, this is an old...
Yeah, it's a trope.
Anti-Semitic trope.
It's very sad. George Soros has done more good in the world than Donald Trump can ever imagine. In terms
regardless of your views of what George Soros has done, I mean, to individually only name check him as the so-called puppet master of this prosecutor is nothing but anti-Semitism.
Oh, absolutely.
That's not even a dog whistle. That's almost a...
No, it's a blatant... It's blatantly anti-Semitic, to the point where there were full-page ads taken out in the papers last week decrying this and asking for people of goodwill to refrain from this, to move away from this, and to call it for what it is. I didn't realize that the American population, American Jewry, is only about 2.4%.
Yeah, it's a very
of the
small
American
population. That's because of where we live. There are a lot of Jewish people in this part of the country, but
yes,
mostly, go outside this area and you're not going to find many American Jews.
No, you're certainly not going to find them down south. You're certainly not going to find them in the Midwest. Maybe Skokie, Illinois. But and also
who's the movie with Gene Wilder, the Frisco Kid, whatever, Jewish kid going out to the Wild West. Not too much of that.
I remember a very good TV movie starring Danny Kaye as an older gentleman, He was a bagel maker in Stoughton, Illinois, where there was a neo-Nazi rally, and basically he, went out and confronted these people, for their, and I think he was a veteran. I think he was a survivor of the camps. It was a pretty interesting story. It was probably back in the 80s. In fact, I went to his bagel shop when I was visiting Chicago once. I think by that time he had passed away. But
so I shared what I'm most curious to see, these couple things about the indictment being unsealed today. What are you most intrigued to see in these coming days, let's say?
Well, you hit on it with regard
We'll talk
to
again soon, but in these coming days, what are you
what
most intrigued to
charges
see?
that are felonies are supporting other charges. This thing has to be read, and I'm interested to see exactly what the charges are, and to then gauge what the chances are for a conviction. But so, and I also, I also think that again, the poor judge is going to have his hands full, because I don't know how you silence a guy like Trump.
Right, I've heard some people saying a judge can issue a gag order or anything, but
you can't. But really,
they tried that with Roger Stone. He brought up earlier.
He came close to getting sent back to jail.
He did.
He came like that close. And you know what? My personal opinion
It does add a complication, though, that Donald Trump is currently a candidate for president of the United States.
Yeah, but bullies like Trump and Roger Stone, truthfully, most of Trump's outrage, his indignation over this whole thing being persecuted, comes from lack of self-esteem. I think he's shaking in his boots. I would love to have been a fly on the wall when they printed him, and when they basically took him past a jail cell, because I don't care how much he thinks he's going to grift money out of this situation. I think this is something he never wanted to happen.
Well, and just him standing in that courtroom also in front of a judge is something that he never wanted to happen.
No.
And he is not in control there. I mean,
no.
The judge is in control. And from all accounts that I've read, this is a very solid judge who keeps control of his courtroom. So that's a very different environment for somebody like Donald Trump to be in, where
I think Trump,
he is not in control of the room.
Trump is going to basically have to get used to this, because this is what his near-time future is going to look like. One court case after the next. So it'll be interesting to see again if his support is eroded as all these cases commence, and how is he going to basically be able to campaign? He's not a fireball, and when you hear him speak, he's not.
We haven't even talked about his quote-unquote campaign, where he went to Waco, Texas, for the 30th anniversary of the anti-government pedophile cult that was there.
He has a penchant of calling other people low energy. Trump is at an ebb of energy. I think his energy is. I mean, and honestly, it's not going to get any better. And now added these legal complications.
Well, again, I mean, does he really want to be president again, or is he just trying to shield himself from investigations by running for president?
It could be.
He didn't seem particularly like being president.
Combination of the two.
So,
and listen, he spent more time than Obama, who he railed against playing golf.
Yeah.
So,
the other thing, I guess, as we wrap up here, because the bell's about to ring, I know you have to go. I'm going to go home to my baby. But tonight, Donald Trump is going to speak at Mar-a-Lago.
I will tune in to see what kind of nonsense he spews.
I'm going to tune in too.
He'll be correct.
It's been a while since I've listened to a full Donald Trump speech. I'll see clips here and there from his events.
This is the last.
But I'm going to tune into this one because
this is the last major thing he's going to get from TV for a while, except for Fox.
Okay, does he stay on a script tonight, or can he not help himself?
He can't help himself. Unless he's been chastened by the day's experience.
Right.
And don't forget, flew in yesterday, he's flying back tonight.
Yeah.
All right, albeit he's on a private jet,
But if he, veers all over the place, as is his habit to do, that could create new problems for him.
Yeah. Yes and no, but I think he'll test everything. And I think he's going to test the court, he's going to test the judge, he's going to test his lawyers. And I think it's Katie bar the door tonight. I think you'll basically get a irrational Trump who will veer off script and basically be like stream of consciousness Trump. You know, I don't think he'll be able to control himself, because actually he's going to have a lot of pent-up emotions, because ultimately what happens today is, guilty and not guilty.
Right.
Not guilty. I mean,
Well, then think about talking about flying back and forth. He's
Yeah.
going to have 3 hours to just stew on all of it.
Yeah.
Flying back to Florida.
Yeah, he might rip up the plane.
So if nothing else, it has been an unprecedented day today in American history. A former president facing an indictment in New York City. We will see how this plays out. But please let us know your thoughts as always. Once again, we can be reached all the time at Wigs for Wigs. That is WIGSFORWHIGS, the name of this podcast, at gmail.com. We always love hearing from you. Again, especially if you're a legal expert of any kind, reach out and let us know what we messed up on and what your thoughts are looking ahead to this case. The indictment's coming down any moment now to become public, I'm sure. So we'll have more to talk about very soon on another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Take care, everybody.